Hello and welcome back to another episode of They Don't Teach This in Law School. I'm your host, Charlie Mann of law firm Alchemy. My guest today, it's a real treat. I recently had a great conversation with him on his show, The Driven Crowd, which I highly recommend you check out on podcast platforms everywhere. He's a friend of mine, a coaching client, someone who is doing some amazing things out in Texas, connecting with a lot of people and building a great firm, great economics, great culture, and just someone who's constantly pushing to be a better version of himself, and with a truly beautiful family who I will undoubtedly ask him about during this episode. So let me welcome to the show, Scott Snellings. Scott, great to have you here, man.
Hey, awesome to be on, Charlie. Thank you so much. And yes, the family is obviously the most important, and I am happy to discuss all aspects of that.
Good. You know I'm going to ask you about the little guy, Jake. I just have to at some point. He's such a cool dude. He really is.
He is. He just started first grade today, too, by the way.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, I'm so happy for him.
Yeah.
Truly, I'm so happy for him. We'll talk about that story. But you have to answer the question. What's one thing they don't teach you in law school?
Yeah, man, it's one of those things I had to actually narrow it down. Right. There's many things that come to mind, but I would say probably one that maybe not a whole lot of people mention is the power of a network. And I don't think that is exclusive to law school. They don't teach you that anywhere. Maybe in business school. I don't know. I never stepped foot in business school. But leveraging the power of your network and keeping up with it and really utilizing it and how to build a network and how to provide value to people, none of that was ever discussed. It was more along the lines of, they train you to become an operator, at least, at the 30,000 foot level operator, but they don't teach you how to be a business person or how to go get business. In fact, I remember asking, I think I was maybe a year in at my first job at a bigger firm, and I remember going to one of the named partners and saying, hey, how do I develop a book of business? And he kind of took his glasses off and he's like, just do good work and the business will come. And at that point I was like, that's just not true. Because we were representing auto manufacturers, and I was like, if I do great work, Chevy or GM is not going to come knocking on my door saying, Scott, let us give you work. So it didn't make sense then, and it still doesn't make sense to me.
I mean, look, ultimate answer, the whole concept of your network is your net worth, right? Love that quote. I wish I knew who said. Do you know who said that by any chance?
No idea. It wasn't me.
Okay, I hate doing it. Yeah, okay, well, you know what? I'm assigning it to you. Scott Snellings was the first one to ever say your network is your net worth. So why not? Someone's going to object to that in the show notes somewhere, and I won't see it. That's okay. But yeah, your network is so important. You and I have had discussions about this undoubtedly. So you had this suspicion early on about the whole, it's not enough to just do good work and the cases will come, a refrain that no matter what industry you're in is super irksome. I mean, that I do the leather working stuff on the side for fun. That's another random place where people say, you just got to make high quality products and people buy them. And I'm like, I don't know what fantasy land you live in, but it's not that one. So what did you do to did you already innately know this? Did you have to train yourself on this skill set? How did you get good there?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that irked me the most about it is, I have control over doing good work, right? I can learn, I can become an amazing operator and do great work. But then I just have to sit there and wait to be recognized and wait for people. I don't like to wait, Charlie, you know that. And so there's nothing proactively you can do other than doing the great work.
You don't say, Scott.
Yeah. Hey, life is short, man, and I don't like to wait. So, yeah, I think innately I didn't really put my finger on it necessarily right away, but I knew, hey, maybe it's right for him, maybe it's right for other people, but it's not right for me. So how do we go about creating relationships to bring work in, right? Because that's one of the refrains in our office is, hey man, it is all about relationships. All about relationships. And so I think I've grown up in kind of a service-oriented family, right? Both my parents always volunteered, and we'd go to church, we would go on mission trips and things like that. And so I always want to provide value, right? And I think that's the great starting point for developing any relationship is you go into it with the mindset of, hey, how can I provide value to this person? Whether it's send business to them, whether it's give them advice, whether it is just hear them out. And so when I go into a relationship and I look to provide value first, those are the ones that are always the strongest and deepest relationships. Look, we've all been to the networking events where the guy selling tchotchkes comes up and introduces himself and throws a card in your face and says, buy your stuff from me.
Almost
right?
literally.
Yeah. And so those typically go in the trash can, right? I don't know who he is. I don't know what his products are like, anything like that. But the person who comes up and says, hey, what do you do? Oh, wow, it's really interesting. You know what? Have you met so-and-so? You might have some synergy there. And so providing value, you can provide value by opening up your own network, right? Introducing people. That's what I love to do. I love to say, oh, hey, Charlie, you just started a new business. Do you have a bookkeeper? I know you're struggling with that. Hey, I have a really good one. Let me make an introduction. And so
don't hit my one pain point here, Scott. How dare you hit my one major pain point?
Exactly. Hey, it's going to come. It's going to come early. And so I think developing the relationships and going deeper than surface level is a strategy in and of itself. But then managing those relationships, right? I mean, I've been an attorney for going on 20 years now. That's a lot of people that I've interacted with, right? Clients, providers, other attorneys, friends, family, former clients, all those things. And so how do I keep it straight? And that's one of the things that, as you well know, I'm working on right now is how do I systemize the process to where I can actually focus on being present with the people I'm with, but I don't forget people along the way. How do I follow up with people in some sort of a systematic way to where I'm staying in front of them, I'm keeping up with what's going on in their lives, and I think once I can get to that point, then, we're there, right? I mean, it's amazing. That would be a great spot to be. So that's where my efforts are right now in terms of the networking side.
So let's talk in a couple of stages here. Let's talk first to people who are listening to this and being like, oh, Scott, you seem just like affable and you're handsome and outgoing and just a lovable person. I'm not that. I'm a tucked away troll of an introvert, which in the head, a lot of that. How do you get that person? What would you tell that person about coming out of their shell?
Yeah. Hey, I think you walk into any room and there's going to be everybody, probably the vast majority of people anyway, who are uncomfortable, right? Even the people who are outgoing aren't necessarily comfortable being that way. And so how I would start is I would go up to somebody who is a lot like, and go start a conversation. Be curious, right? That is the key to developing any relationship, in my mind, is be curious and listen. Everybody's favorite subject is themselves. We all know that. And so just start asking questions. And if you need to, prepare a script in your head. Hey, here's the kind of questions that I can ask absolutely anyone.
Yeah. It's the being able to find openers. It's like a secret superpower that you can develop of how to initiate conversation. So, Scott, I'm glad that you mentioned the whole, get good at talking to people who are anxious, nervous. Because, by the way, everyone is anxious and nervous. This is what I tell my kids, right? Like Veronica and Cassidy, they hear from me in the lunchroom. If you see the kid who's walking around who doesn't have a table, promise me one thing: you invite them to the table because you were that kid at one point. Everyone is just searching for an opening. The most pride I have in my kids is when they come home and they tell me things like, oh yeah, one of my friends came in and there were no other seats at the table of our group, so I got up and went and sat with them at a different table. I'm like, yes, that's how we want to go through life, is inviting people into our lives. And huge difference maker. Now, what about the person who goes, okay, I'm all right at conversation, but you're talking about this whole value.
Yeah, so that's where the curiosity comes into play, right? You can provide value in any number of ways. Like I said to begin with, listening, right? Paying attention to someone, providing value in letting them kind of open up to you and develop that, oh, hey, look, I also do this, and you get something in common, and then all of a sudden they relax a little bit and they start to enjoy themselves more, right? But then be on the lookout for tells, right? Like I'm a big book guy, you know that. And so it's a joke around the office, like, oh, if somebody wants to learn something, just go to Scott because he's got some kind of book on it, right? I mean, if I turn the camera around, you'd see my bookshelf here, and this is like probably the books that I have on there for this year, and it's about full. And so I send a ton of books out, right? I provide value by recognizing people for what they've accomplished. If I see a magazine or something, I'm looking over at my desk over here because I typically keep the magazines over there. I'll flip through it, especially the lawyer stuff. And if somebody may partner, if somebody switched firms or whatever, I may cut it out and write a handwritten note to them and send it off. And I try to make notes on my conversations with people so they feel a connection, right? If I go up to somebody who I spoke with last month and I've completely forgotten all of our conversation and I start telling them things that I've already told them, or I forget that, their dad was in the hospital and I don't even ask, then it's a pretty telltale sign that that wasn't a very good connection. But if I go up to them at the next event, or if I reach out to them just on my own, I'm like, hey, how's your dad doing? Wow, all of a sudden, I mean, you have an amazing connection right there that, wow, they actually not only heard me, but they remembered and followed up to ask. And so you can provide value in a ton of different ways. Gifts are great. Taking people out to lunch, following up with people provides value in my eyes. I can't tell you how many times I've felt like I had a really good connection with somebody, and if I forgot to follow up, then that was wasted, right? And the same thing on the other side. If I have, I'm at the point now where I have younger attorneys reaching out to me and asking for advice, and I'm more than happy to give advice. I love talking to the younger attorneys. And if they don't follow up, then I just feel like, they've missed such a huge opportunity.
I know. Oh my gosh, that is so irksome. It's the advice, right, that we try and give everyone in our lives is everyone has good intentions. When they get to a conversation, let's say it's one of these networking things, right, and maybe it's a higher value one, and they say, oh, we really should have another conversation. We should follow up about this. We know that 9 times out of 10, that other person is not going to follow up. But just like, what if you're the person who goes and introduces yourself to all the wallflowers? The same thing applies here. What if you're the person who takes care of the following up? You become hyper valuable. And thank you, Scott, for talking about how value doesn't have to be, I'm going to give you a case, I'm going to give you a client, I'm going to give you money, I'm going to give you attention. Instead, it's just, I'm going to recognize you here. I'm going to see you as the person that you are. And that's just, most people don't get that in their day-to-day life,
No,
especially if we're talking to business.
If somebody
they don't
sends
get
me
recognized for their
something,
achievements nearly
I
often
served
enough.
as president of the Collin County Bar Association 2 years ago now. And a guy that I've known for a long time, all of a sudden I get a letter in the mail and it has that clipping in it. And he's like, hey, congratulations. I know it's a lot of work to get to that point and this, that, and the other. It made me feel great, right? I mean, it's not something that I'm seeking out, and I do it because one, it's great for networking, but two, it's a service that I can provide to the attorneys here.
Yeah.
But yeah, being recognized, everybody loves that, even if they're not seeking it out. And that's just one way. I mean, everybody is a social media stalker, right? Everybody. Whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on Instagram, it's so easy to find something to reach out to somebody on. If I'm following Charlie, I know he just started a new business, I could send him a book. I could send him just a congratulations note. I can look at an article that I see on successful entrepreneurial stuff, right? And cut that out and just send it to him. I love cutting stuff out and writing a handwritten note because nobody gets that, right? I try to make my stuff unique.
Fun fact that people don't know about you, Scott, is you're responsible for most of those tiny little mystery
Charlie,
murder
let's
notes
tell
that got
people
published in the 90s. That was your side
But
gig
yeah, I
back
mean,
then, right?
hey, we have a list for what we have. It's the RLG Society, right? The Read, Learn, Grow Society, and every month when that goes out, our envelope has a wax stamp on the back of it. And my premise being, nobody ever throws away an envelope with a wax stamp on the back of it. They got to see what's inside. And so do something unique to stand out, right? Because your contact may know 100 people that do what you do, but if you're the one that's unique and you're the one that actually adds value to their lives, that's a solid relationship to have, whether they send you business or not. And I think that's a huge mindset that I've just got to point out here is when you're networking, it's a mindset thing. You can provide all the value that you want, but if in your mind it's only to get something back, you're just not going to be as successful, right? If you're going to get out there and you're going to say in your mind, hey, I really, really, really want to provide value in this world. I want to provide value to the people in my network. It will come back around. If that's your focus, then in my mind, it probably isn't. Certainly not to the extent that it could.
Okay, so I want to hone in on two things real quick. One, I have some questions about the wax stamp because I want to dig into your thought process behind that because I think it can come up with really good ideas. And then I want to talk about the other side, the flip against value, which is the power of being able to actually sell. So I want to make sure we hit both of those. But with the wax stamp in particular, Scott,
we got a wedding invitation.
How did you?
We got a wedding invitation, and on the back of the envelope was a wax seal. And my wife was standing there, and I was like, "Who's this from?" She's like, "Oh, I don't know. I didn't open it. I wanted you to see the wax seal." And it kind of struck me as odd, like, why would I care about a wax seal? And she's like, "It just looks fancy." And so I was like, And I just guess I stored it away. And then when we were coming up with kind of our group, what were we going to call it, right? I didn't want it to be necessarily, a law firm group or a VIP club or anything like that. And so I was like, what about something a little fancy, right? And so we came up with the Read, Learn, Grow Society, right? Not the Read, Learn, Grow Club, but the society, and that sounded fancy to me. And we want to do fancy stuff, right? We're planning our first event right now for the wrap of our podcast season. And so I was like, well, what's fancy? Like, how can we fancy this up? And then my wife's, voice chimed in my head, the wax stamp. And so I looked online, and it was super cheap to get. And so, that's how the wax stamp came to be. And to this day, everybody in RLG, I bet probably 70% have commented on the wax stamp.
I mean, look, I get the mailer. It is a legitimate wax. Like, this is not Scott went and got some stickers that look like wax stamps. This is a wax stamp that is on every single envelope. It's kind of wild that
it wasn't a printer.
There's a printer out there who's doing that. It seems insane, Scott, quite frankly, that anyone is engaging in this practice on a mass production level.
We were, and then the list got too big, and it was taking like a week to do it, so we outsourced it.
You guys are doing this in-house? Okay. Because otherwise I really did like to imagine that you have like a crew in the back room. All of you are wearing signet rings with the RLG Society slowly pressing with the signet rings, burning candles through the day. I mean, that would make for a pretty fun video, like for someone who's new to the RLG Society. All of you with like the society hoods on.
I'm writing this down. I'm going to go reach over here and write this down on my tablet here.
I mean, sometimes this is how ideas, and actually, before I say this is how great ideas are born, that's not actually the accurate statement here. Because the great idea here is the original concept of the RLG Society. What this is like how do we add more energy? How do we feel refreshed and excited about it? You and I talk often about the difference between engine and fuel ideas. I've got a video up on the YouTube channel that talks about that stuff, so people can go look at the Law Firm Alchemy channel. I won't do the full explanation here. But that's an example, right? You have this great engine behind the RLG Society, and then you have ways to make it
so we're still at the early stages,
like you're planning an event. What's going into that right now?
Have an event where it could be a little bit on the fancier side, right? So I'm looking at an event planner right now. We're looking at some cool things to do for all of our guests, and it's an opportunity to network, right? How do we provide value in terms of, maybe give them some cool stuff when they show up and have, good drinks and eats and all that kind of stuff. But how do we structure it to where it's a real networking value for our members as well? Because our members are all over the place, right? It can be former clients, it can be people who I work with, it can be anybody in the community. It's all of our podcast guests, obviously, and then anybody who we work with in any kind of capacity has the ability to be in the RLG society. And so how do we connect these potentially very different groups of people to where everybody can leave going, man, that was really cool. It was a great event, but I met so-and-so and I met so-and-so. And so it's almost an opportunity for me to open the doors of my network and make sure that my network is getting the most out of, knowing me as possible.
I actually think that's a really important concept to highlight is you have put yourself at the head of the table without needing to be the person who's having all the conversations. You have curated, right? That's a powerful concept. Curation is very powerful. Whether you're curating ideas or people, which sounds terrible, but it's just true. When you're curating a group of people, that's a great mechanism because what do they all have in common? They have Scott in common. When they get together, what's one of the easiest questions for them to ask? How do you know Scott? Right? That's a central node that you have built. You're going to experience that when you put on the event. A bunch of people, you're going to hear that question. You're going to hear your name throughout the room. It's going to be cognitively fatiguing.
Yeah,
and
to me, that's
asking,
almost one
someone
of
asking for me?
Because I'm not a front and center person. Like, that's just not my personality. It's in developing, Snelling's Law and the brand, I have to, right? You and I talked about this when I first started doing my Motivational Monday videos and the other videos that we are required to do these days. It was painful. I think the very first video I ever did took about 20 minutes, and it was like a 30-second film or a 30-second reel. And it's just not comfortable for me, right? But hey, you got to do what you got to do. And so now it is more comfortable, and it's a skill set. Just like the vast majority of other stuff we do, it's a skill set. Mm-hmm. Networking is a skill set. And the more you put yourself out there and the more you do it, and the more you quit worrying about what people think about you, and you start focusing on them, the quicker and the better you're going to be at it. Because at the end of the day, nobody cares about you, right? You walk into a room, nobody's paying any attention to you and what your dress looks like that day or whether your haircut looks good. Maybe somebody notices, but at the end of the day, it's a fleeting thought. And so as soon as you can get out of your own head and start really trying to provide value to others, man, you're going to have so much more fun. Yeah. It's going to be so much more rewarding, and you're going to be so much more effective.
So that's a tough perspective for people to get, right? The idea of getting out of their own head. Not everyone knows how to get there. They are kind of obsessed with what people think. Do they see the blemish on my skin, right? Look, my wife has that, where there's times where she's like, oh my gosh, my skin is terrible today. I'm just like, I don't know. You've said that 172 times in the last year, and I have yet to see what you're talking about. No one sees the flaws. How do you with video? And I'm going to ask this specifically because I have a different guy that I'm working with who he's trying to get into video, but it freaks him out a little bit. What advice would you give him aside from, okay, yes, you got to do it a lot, right? Like you did it a lot, but within that, what did you discover?
How did I would say first and foremost,
what made
you just got to do it
more innate
and
for you?
Tell yourself, look, none of this ever has to be seen by anyone. There's always the delete button. Things can be edited. But if you really get out there and you just pull up YouTube and you just start watching different videos, you start watching people's reels, people talk over themselves all the time. They stumble on their words. They say things that don't make sense. And do you ever go, oh, I can't believe that person put this out there. That's ridiculous. No, it's just like normal conversation, right? And it makes you real. If everything you do is perfect, that's not real. And so to me, if I flub something, I don't delete it. I may start over if I just completely lose my train of thought or whatever, but for the most part, it's very conversational. I will screw up things that I say and keep going. I mean, just go listen to one of my podcasts, right? I'll get halfway into a question and realize I don't know where I'm trying to go and be like, yeah, that was a terrible question. Let me start over here. And so I think just getting comfortable not being perfect, and you can do that by just watching other people's reels, right? I mean, the perfect ones are out there for sure, But if you listen to podcasts, that's a great way because people typically will screw up their words on podcasts or talk all over the place. And so I would say comparing or seeing the other successful people out there doing it and how they're not perfect. And then, man, just spend an hour in front of a camera. And just like a closing argument for me, like I don't have it memorized, I don't have it all written out as bullet points. And so if I practice that closing argument 20 times, it's going to come out 20 different ways. And so I think it's the same thing with video. It's more authentic if you just kind of shoot from the hip, right? Know what you want to talk about, know where you're trying to go with it, but don't rehearse it. Just turn the camera on. On my Motivational Mondays, I'll have a topic in mind. I hit play, and I don't really know what's going to come out, Charlie. I really don't. And sometimes I'm like halfway into it, I'm like, yeah, this makes zero sense. And I'll just start over. But the majority of the time, you know, the thought's up there. I had the idea. I knew what I wanted to get out, and it just happens. And a lot of that's practice, too, because I've been doing it for a long time. But I would say you got to get out in front of the camera and just do it. And maybe don't even look at it. I don't even think I looked at the first several that I did because I was just horrified.
So video... Yeah, I wish I could say I know the feeling, but the whole theater major thing kind of made me love the camera a little bit too much at first. Just had to get adjusted to it. But for you, I mean, you've made video a bigger and bigger part of what you do with the firm. Are there plans to go even farther with video with what you're doing? Are there any new
always,
ideas,
right?
Concepts on the horizon
our marketing
for you
team
with
is
that
always
medium?
pushing us to do different things. And I think it's difficult because there's the popular stuff out there, right? The being goofy and the doing silly stuff that gets lots of likes and whatnot. But that's just not really, I mean, I'll be goofy with my kids all day long. That's not really the professional persona that I want to put out there, right? Not for the types of cases that we're trying to get. That doesn't really fit in my mind. And so I'm trying to stay consistent with the vision of the firm, and you know, you're going to always be pushed and pulled to get away from that and do the popular things and whatnot. So there's that aspect of it, and then too, you know, trying new things. YouTube's here to stay, obviously. You know, we don't do TikTok, we do Instagram, we do Facebook, but I'm always open to new stuff, and we're always looking at, okay, what can we do? How can we make our message more effective? Because, I mean, one of our core values is love for the community. And one of the things that we do for the community is we educate, right? Because the vast majority of people, I'm a personal injury lawyer, the vast majority of people have zero idea how insurance works. They have zero idea the risk out there of people who don't have insurance, and they don't understand the process. And so a lot of our videos are geared towards education. They're also geared towards kind of getting to know our team and feeling comfortable with us and being around us. But you know, we really want to change the stigma associated with personal injury lawyers as being, you know, these greedy, terrible banes of society. Because I think the vast majority of personal injury lawyers are really, really good people. And so that's one of the things that we try to address in our videos as well.
Yeah. Okay, so I have to ask. Oh wait, no, I promised I would talk about selling at some point. I want to talk about selling, but then I want to ask about Jake and kind of some of your bigger whys in life, because you have a lot of
Did you just call me old?
A lot of life lived that is worth talking about. But before then, let's talk selling, because you talked about value earlier. No, you are a young man who has, in some cases, for better and for worse, been put through a lot of life, right? You and I have talked about this, right? You have more stories to tell than the average person at your age of some real things that you've had to deal with. So the selling side of things, you talked about value earlier, and I admittedly have this estranged at times relationship with the word value, which is why I appreciate that you talked about it in the way that you did, because it wasn't just like you have to prostrate yourself in front of an individual and bow down and give them everything that you have waiting to get something in return. It was like, there's just things that people appreciate right? You start with that type of value and you constantly think about the output, but it's not completely destroying yourself in the process. I have unfortunately seen some entrepreneurs essentially say, like, I'm going to give away the whole farm and I'm going to charge you nothing ever for anything that I do. I think one of the things that you've done well, Scott, overall, is you have also set yourself up to sell well. You are a good advocate for your firm, and you are not really afraid to close the deal, which is why you can put out so much value. But talk to me a little bit about
so first and foremost,
what makes
I think
you
we've
good
built
at closing
the firm
deals
to provide an amazing client experience. We're not a volume firm. We are I hate the word boutique firm because I don't really know what that means, but we really focus on delivering a great experience. And so I think it starts off with our very first intake call and providing value there, right? When we answer the phones, we're going to say, hey, we're going to walk you through this process. You don't just have to brain dump on us because you don't know what we need to know. We're going to walk you through, we're going to ask you very specific questions, and we're going to make sure that everything you need to tell us, we're asking, so you don't feel any pressure there. And I think throughout the whole process, our clients feel that, because we want them to be able to focus on getting better, and we're going to take all the stress and everything else off of their plate, and we're going to deal with that behind the scenes. We'll reach out to them when we need information, but we also check in on them, right? We have a client right now who is about to get married this coming weekend. And so we looked on the registry and we're sending her a gift because, there is a connection there, right? We're providing value from the legal front, but hey, they're people too, right? And they have other things going on in life than their personal injury claim. And so we're constantly looking for, okay, what's important to them? Because that helps us develop, the full damages model of their case, but it also allows us to ensure that we're treating them as, the law firm that we want to be. We tout our services in terms of selling. Everybody, one of their first questions that they want to know the answers to is, what do you charge? And so we explain the contingency fee to them, and we say, look, you're going to hear everything that we do, and at the end of the day, you're going to hear that we charge more, right? We don't, most people do a third on the front end, meaning pre-suit, and then 40% if you have to file suit. We charge a little bit more on the front end, not much, but the service benefits that you get from working with a firm like ours, as well as, I think we're really, really good at what we do. The value increase from working with us, I think, is huge. So I don't think we've ever had pushback on it because people see the value that they're getting, right? If you're out there advertising, the cheapest rates, like, I'm not going to buy that. It's, maybe if it's something nominal to me, but if it's important to me, I'm not going to go look for the cheapest one out there. I'm going to look at, hey, what's the best product for me? And if it means I got to pay a little bit more, then I'm going to pay a little bit more. And so I think that's a real differentiator for us. We don't run from it. Like, we use it as a selling point. Like, look, we are your high-level PI firm. And so, we are going to charge a little bit more, but the service and, we think the results are going to be well worth it.
Always worth pushing yourself up the value and economics ladder because, oh, by the way, you actually then can afford to provide the next level service. It's always a shame when you see a service provider who is very clearly saying, like, hey, I'm going to be the mid-tier price, but I'm going to provide you with, the most expensive level benefits. And you go, I get the feeling you're going to promise me those benefits, and I'm never going to see those realized. And of course, a lot of people end up buying that type of package because they're easily tricked and stuff like that. You're just kind of going down the high road on it and saying, we go above and beyond. So our prices are a little bit above, but it's not that substantial. I mean, frankly, like the few percentage points or whatever, it's really not that substantial at the end of the day for a client who deals with less emotional turmoil, has a higher degree of trust. And that's actually the funny part about this. When people pay more, they often will put more trust, not less trust, into the provider. I'll bet that you deal with
and we're upfront with
generally
them,
lower
right?
level
We say, look,
of
here's
client
the
complaints
communication.
overall.
Here's how we communicate. Here's our expectations. If this isn't you, then we're not the right firm for you, right? We tell them up front, like, look, if you have a problem, tell us. We're a very transparent firm. Tell us what the problem is and let's fix it. If you call in screaming and cussing at our team, we will fire you. We don't deal with that here. That's not the kind of clientele that we help, and that's not the firm that we have. I don't want people coming to work dreading having to talk to clients because they're getting screamed and yelled at. And we tell them that up front. I mean, as we're going through the contract, we say, look, rarely do we have to fire people, but when we do, here's why. So don't be that
Yes.
person. And so I think when you make yourself more exclusive, yeah. And so when you make yourself
That's
more
right. Don't,
exclusive
I
and you
mean,
show
please
them,
don't be
like,
that
look,
person.
we have a top-notch firm here. We have these expectations of you. It becomes a more exclusive thing. I mean, we turn down probably 90% of the cases that call in. We make sure that we help them. We get them to a good attorney that can help them, or we get them somewhere else where they can get some help. But we don't sign up the vast majority of cases, and we get to be picky because we're really good at what we do, and we want to have the team that can provide the most value. And those are the kind of cases that we sign up, the ones where we can provide the most value to the client.
So, Scott, I mentioned at the very beginning you have a podcast, The Driven Crowd. I think driven's an important word in there because that's a way that you very much live your own life. And I talked about, I wanted to ask about Jake, and I know, like I've said, you've got some stories in life. I didn't even, ask you ahead of time what you are comfortable going into or not. So I'm going to give you a blanket question here and see where you want to take it, which is, what from your past or present informs this level of driven
it's always
nature
been there to some extent, right? I'm an only child, so I had the parents' full attention on me, and so I was pushed. They pushed me pretty hard, but I grew up in martial arts, and I had an amazing instructor who expected the most out of me, and in a very loving way, a very disciplined way. He's a Marine, but in a very loving way, right? And so that's probably the beginnings of it. But then, as I always had these huge expectations for myself of, what did I want to do? And I always wanted to be a doctor, right? My mom got a spine surgery when I was a kid, and it really, was impressed upon me. God, that'd be a really cool thing to be able to do. And then my career path changed in college. I did not make a very good grade in biology my first year. I hadn't quite learned how to study yet. And I was quickly informed that I would not be a doctor, certainly not with those kind of grades. And so I ended up kind of falling into law school, and I know who falls into law school, right?
Yeah.
But ended up, I only wanted to do personal injury, and so ended up getting into that. And all through just like, hey, I don't really know what I want to do, so whatever I'm doing right now, I'm going to do it really hard. I'm going to focus on it, and ended up doing that. And so the driven part has always kind of been there. And then, with my family, whenever I started my own law firm, Snellings Law, 2 months later, I had a kidney transplant. And there's a perspective changer for you, right? And then I got through that. Things were on the up and up, and we were worried that my little guy, Jake, had cancer. We had these big lumps in his lymph nodes, and, I thought that going through a kidney transplant was tough emotionally, but having your little guy there that you have zero control over, the results, that was hard. Man, for any parent out there to be waiting on the phone call from the doctor as to whether your kid has cancer or not is just heart-wrenching. And, I'm a man of faith, and so I think I have a perspective of, look, these hard situations are there for a reason. And I may not understand that reason, but I can tell you this, every single time I've gone through it, my relationship with God has gotten closer and tighter, and I've learned a ton. I've learned that I can be as driven as I want to and fail. I can be as driven as I want to and have any kind of issues that you can possibly imagine. And at the end of the day, it's not my plan that's going to come to fruition. And so I really look at it as kind of a surrender to God and doing my absolute best to do everything I can on this earth to praise Him and to be as helpful as I can to every person in my community. And do I always win at that? No. It's a daily fight for me to live His will and not mine, because I really like mine. And so I think that's really one of the things, especially later in life, that has driven me to take each day to the fullest. Jake also has autism, and he is such an inspiration for me. He's an inspiration for our whole family. My oldest wants to go into special ed education. Yeah, the little dude always has a smile on his face.
Hey,
he has CRMO
me too.
which is basically his bone marrow gets inflamed, and some days he'll be in a wheelchair, and then other days, like a couple days ago, he's doing cartwheels. So you just never know. But regardless, you wouldn't know if he was hurting or not because he's always smiling. And so I use him as inspiration on a lot of days too.
I mean, I'm fortunate enough to have seen some of the photos of Jake just grinning, seeing some of his successes and everything. I will tell you, Scott, you get the official award for the first person to ever get me to well up and feel choked up on on any podcast, for that matter. Literally, just hearing you talk about Jake earlier and waiting on a cancer diagnosis. I mean, I've got my 6 and 8-year-old, and like that stuff hits home. And to know that you're still handling the weight as someone who dealt with a kidney transplant, father, husband, business owner, a faithful man. That's a lot of stuff that you carry around, and you carry it around, from what I have seen, with a level of grace, humility, but also I'm going to toss the word triumph in there, in not an egotistical but just generally positive way. Where does that come from, and how do you keep it from spiraling?
Second of all, God has blessed me with the ability to basically turn my brain off and just plow through difficult stuff. I mean, I just have an ability to kind of zone out and just get it done. I don't sit there and dwell on things necessarily. And hey, look, for all the difficult things that I've been through, there's been so many more blessings in my life. And would I trade places with anybody? No. My life is amazing. And, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing exactly what I'm supposed to do, with an amazing family. My mom and dad are amazing. And I couldn't be more blessed. And so I feel like I owe it to my family, to our team here, to my God, to give it everything I can. And the bad stuff's going to come, right? And, Ben Glass, who we both know quite well, is like, hey, what if this problem wasn't really a problem, and we look back on it and we thought of all the cool things that have happened because of that. That's not exactly how he says it, but that's how it is in my mind. Mm-hmm. And so I love that approach of looking at these things that come up and like, hey, what if it's not really a problem so much as a challenge to be overcome? And I'm both big mindset guys, but there's something to it, right? If I sat there and was like, oh my gosh, I have, my kidneys are shutting down and I need a transplant, the world is over, I could have just gone and curled up and died. But that's not how I choose to live my life, and I don't think that's a worthy way to live. So I love the approach of looking at it for, okay, cool, what's the best we can make out of this situation? What's something that we can learn? How can we grow? What's some positivity that can come out of this?
There's a song, Dissect the Bird, by John Cagey, I want to say is the artist's name. And in it during the last verse of the song, he talks about all the things that had to happen for you, the individual, to be possible. There are wars that had to be fought. Billions of cells had to survive billions of diseases, all this other stuff that he goes through, just so that way you could open your eyes, right? That's what life is. There's so much that happened up to this exact moment, up to this moment that you and I are having this conversation, that had to go right for us to be in this position right now. What is there to do but be grateful and love what we have?
Yeah, and
way
how many
more
things had to
than
go
we ever
wrong,
wish
terribly wrong
than we
for us to
had.
be where we are, but specifically wrong, right? Good and bad. And yeah, I think with my faith, I can look at this and say, look, this is just such a short period of time, my existence on this earth. And with each year, you gain even more perspective there. Our oldest, Emma, is starting her junior year of high school. When I met her, she was 5 years old. She's my stepdaughter. And now she's starting her junior year. She passed her driving test, and I just look back and I'm like, man, how on earth have we gotten here this quickly? The law firm is about to be 6 years old, and it's just absolutely amazing how time flies, and each year just adds more perspective to how quickly it is. And so I think in our minds, we really have to look at even the days that are horrible struggles and say, you know what, that's a blessing that we got to live today, and there's opportunity from these struggles, whatever it is. And I'm not sitting here trying to be, Mr. Optimist, nothing ever sucks. There's plenty of things that suck, and I acknowledge that they suck, but there's still good that can come out of it. So I don't want to come across as a head in the sand guy, right?
No, you're very pragmatic for sure. I mean, yeah, there are times when it's just like, hey, this is rough, but I remember early on when you and I were having conversations, there was this perspective of like, dude, you've survived a lot, like literally survived a lot worse than an employee
absolutely.
Leaving with
and sometimes,
3 days
I think
notice.
one of the huge things that I've done over the last probably 6 years of my life is been very intentional on who I surround myself with. And I think that has also led to tremendous happiness in my life because I've removed all the negative people from my life, right? I've surrounded myself with positive people who have great motivations and who are really, really good people and are encouragers, right? That's one of the things I love to do. I feel like one of my gifts is encouragement, and I love to encourage people. I love to just help people. To me, that has been huge in my life, is really cutting off all of the negativity and then circling around the guys that really lift me up and provide positivity, and then doing the same for them, lifting them up and being positive and checking in on each other. That's been huge, especially during the hard times.
Yeah, it's a game changer. Scott, I mean, honestly, you and I could probably talk for hours and hours across all kinds of topics, but that's why I'm going to have Scott back on the show for sure. There's no doubt about that. But if people either want to interact with the podcast or the law firm, where should we send folks? If
so
if
the
they're
podcast
like, World of
is
Scott
the Driven
sounds
Crowd
interesting.
podcast,
I want to see where I
and
fit
then
in.
social media, it's Snellings Law. You can just Google that. You get to our website. Me personally, Scott Snellings. You can find me on LinkedIn, or that's probably where I'm most active as myself, and not the firm. But yeah, any of those avenues you can find us. We also have a YouTube channel, Snellings Law. So any of those, feel free to reach out. Love to talk to you.
And Scott means it when he says that. He's a guy who loves a good conversation, motivation, all that stuff. I will vouch for that much, for sure. Well, Scott, I appreciate you being on the show. I look forward to talking with you again. God bless that amazing family of yours. I'm always so happy to see.
All right, thanks for having me on, Charlie. It was awesome as always.
We will talk again shortly, I'm sure. As always. Thank you all very much for listening to another episode of They Don't Teach This in Law School. We'll see you again on the next episode.